This video serves two purposes. One, what do you do if another vehicle has crashed into your vehicle and you want to sue them or claim through the insurance, but they refuse to give you their name and address? And two, if you obtain their name and address from the DVLA, is the DVLA in breach of GDPR? The second is actually an answer to the first. I'm not going to give the name of the person that asked me this question because it sounds like an ongoing dispute and I don't want any possibility of this causing an issue between them. But essentially the point of it is this. One vehicle had crashed into another on a car park, left a number to call them to discuss it, but then refused to give them the name and the address when they disagreed with the quote that they had for repairing the damage to the vehicle. Now, the person who crashed into the vehicle was quite happy to pay something for the repairs, but disagreed with the quotes because presumably they were too high, and then as a result refused to give their name and address because of course they didn't want it to affect their insurance and no claims bonus and so on. The person that emailed me had said that their insurance company said they cannot raise a claim against the other person without knowing the name and address. Of course, without knowing those details, it might sound like it's too difficult when you only have the vehicle registration. However, as a general guidance rather than legal advice, here's what I would do in that situation. There is a form on the DVLA website called a V888 form. This is a request by an individual for information about a vehicle. Now, you need to pay a fee, you need to give your own name and address, and you need to give what is referred to in law as reasonable cause to require the information of the registered keeper of the vehicle that's crashed into you. Because after all, it's the registered keeper that you need to make contact with to find out who the driver of the vehicle was at the material time. This is similar to what the police would do if they suspect someone of speeding. They would write to the registered keeper of the vehicle under a 172 notice to identify who was driving the vehicle at the time and responsible for the offence. Broadly, the same is true here. You would want to write to the vehicle registered keeper in order to find out who was driving the vehicle, or if you wanted your insurance company to raise a claim against their insurance company, you need to know the name and address of the registered keeper. So by completing this form and you tick some boxes to say that this is the reasonable cause that you want the details, that being usually because there's been a collision, or in worst cases there's an offence attached. And as a side note, I might be minded to report this to the police because it's a technical failure to stop because they only gave a phone number. Now, it might be understandable that they don't provide all those details on a slip of paper under your windscreen wiper so that everybody can see them. But when you make contact and they refuse to give those details to you, in my view, that is going to give rise to an argument that they failed to stop because they failed to give you the relevant details for their name, address, and insurer, which is required when any collision has occurred on a road or other public place. That being the case, if it were me, I would be filling in this form. I've done this in the past, by the way, albeit some years ago. You fill in this form, you send it off, and they give you the name and address of the registered keeper of the vehicle. This you can then either give to your insurance company or you can do it yourself through the civil courts. You can always sue for damage to a vehicle if it's been caused and there's clear evidence, as there was in the email that I was sent. There was clear evidence of the other person having caused this collision and damage to the vehicle and therefore would be liable to the cost of repairs. Moving on to the second question, which lots of people have complained about before, is the DVLA in breach of GDPR by disclosing your personal data to a third party? The short answer is no, but the longer answer is that the DVLA ended up in some publications when there was an argument that it was in breach of GDPR because it relied on the wrong basis for disclosing that data. In fact, the DVLA should have relied on the public task basis for disclosing the data rather than a legal obligation. The ICO, in fact, confirmed this in an opinion in that it was a technical breach of GDPR and thus took no action because ultimately the result was the same. The ICO took the view that the regulations created a power rather than a legal duty for the DVLA to disclose information. And this is contained within the Road Vehicles Registration and Licensing Regulations of 2002, specifically Regulation 27.1, which provides that the Secretary of State may make any particulars contained in the register available for use by, and then sub E, any person who can show to the satisfaction of the Secretary of State that he has reasonable cause for wanting the particulars to be made available to him. Reasonable cause could be that there's been a collision and they're refusing to admit liability. Therefore, the reasonable cause for having the information is you want to report them to your insurance company, the police, or even take them to court. So naturally, you need those details to be able to do that. those details are in the register. They're in the register because to be on a road or other public place, the vehicle's got to be registered with the DVLA, with a registered keeper, and so on and so forth. So the DVLA can disclose these as a public task rather than a legal obligation, because it creates a power rather than a legal obligation to provide those details to somebody who can show reasonable cause. The way you do that is by declaring it on the V888 form. It's better if you've reported it to the police, in my opinion, because if you've reported it to the police, then it makes it a little bit more official, because there might well be a crime number attached to it, or at the very least you've reported it, and in a case such as this where they've failed or refused to give you those details, it's a technical failure to stop. So you could report that to the police, you could get a police reference number, you could put that on the form along with all the other details and pay your fee. The fee is contained in the regulations under sub 2. Particulars may be provided to such person as mentioned on payment of such a fee, and so on and so forth. So you can fill this form in, send it off to the DVLA. They should then, if they believe and are satisfied that there is a reasonable cause for those details, provide you with the name and address of the registered keeper. Bearing in mind it's not necessarily the registered keeper of the vehicle that was driving the vehicle at the time. They may have absolutely no idea what happened or that there's been any kind of collision on a car park. Take, for example, a new driver recently passed their test that's taken their parents' vehicle out because they're named on the insurance. One of the parents might be the registered keeper of the vehicle, not told mum or dad about the collision on the car park, kept quiet about it. So if you turn up to speak to or write to mum and dad about this issue, bearing in mind they may know nothing about it. So don't go in there with a heavy hand and anger and frustration, because they may know nothing about it. Although I would like to think they'd be eager to sort it out if it was one of their children or relatives that was driving the vehicle at the alleged time. So as always, none of this can be taken as legal advice, just guidance, you understand, but those are my views. That's what I would do in that situation to obtain. In fact, I have done that beforehand because I had a hit and run in a car park exactly the same way, and someone had dented my door and I needed to know who it was because all I had was the vehicle registration plate because there was CCTV outside the shop. I hope that's useful. Please do like the video, subscribe, comment below. All those things help to share my videos with lots of other people. And with that, I'll see you next time.